Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Kneel. The command wasn't a request. It was a detonation of alpha pheromones that shattered the air in the grand ballroom. Glassware rattled on the trays of trembling waiters, and 300 high society socialites dropped to their knees in a synchronized wave of submission. Everyone except one. Rowan stood alone in the sea of bowed heads, his spine a rod of iron, staring directly into the golden, predatory eyes of King Kalen Valerius. He held his breath, not out of fear, but to keep from choking on the suffocating scent of burnt cedar and ozone rolling off the man who could execute him with a snap of his fingers. I said. Kalen stepped down from the dais, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Rowan's chest like a warning shot. Kneel. Rowan adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling imperceptibly, and tilted his chin up. My knees are bad, Your Majesty, he lied, his voice cutting through the terrified silence like a razor blade. And I don't bow to biological accidents. The gasps from the floor were audible. In the kingdom of Oakhaven, biology was law. Alphas ruled, betas served, and omegas were cherished ornaments, pampered, protected, and stripped of all agency. To defy an alpha was social suicide. To defy the alpha king, the apex of the bloodline, was treason. Kalen froze. The king, a man whose shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of an empire and whose jawline looked carved from granite, didn't signal the guards to drag the insolent Omega away. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a wolf that had finally found prey that wouldn't roll over. Kalen closed the distance between them, his heavy velvet cape trailing on the marble floor. He stopped inches from Rowan, looming over him, invading his personal space with an arrogance that made Rowan's skin prickle. A biological accident, Kalen murmured, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper that only Rowan could hear. Is that what you call the king who keeps the borders secure so you can play librarian? I call a man who uses pheromones to force compliance a bully, not a king, Rowan retorted, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He expected a strike. He expected the crushing weight of the king's aura to force him down physically. Instead, Kalen laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. Stand, then, little archivist. Stand while the rest of them grovel. I find I prefer you at eye level. That night marked the beginning of the hunt. Rowan Ashcroft was an anomaly. In a city where omegas spent their fortunes on scent enhancers and courtship academies, hoping to catch the eye of a wealthy alpha, Rowan smelled of nothing but old paper and sterile suppressants. He was the head archivist of the Royal Library, a position he had clawed his way into through sheer intellectual brilliance, hiding his secondary gender until it was legally impossible to do so. He viewed his omega nature as a curse, a biological cage he refused to acknowledge. He hated Kalen Valerius. He hated what the king represented, absolute power, unchecked instinct, and the archaic laws that said Rowan belonged in a breeding nursery rather than a library. But Kalen Valerius was not a man who accepted rejection. In fact, he seemed to thrive on it. 2 days after the incident in the ballroom, the king appeared in the royal archives. The library was Rowan's sanctuary, a labyrinth of dust motes and towering shelves filled with leather-bound history. When the heavy oak doors creaked open, admitting the king and his terrifying scent of cedar and rain, the sanctuary became a trap. Rowan was on a ladder, retrieving a tome on pre-unification tax laws, when he felt the atmosphere shift. The air grew heavy, charged with static. He didn't need to look down to know who was there. You're not authorized to be in this section, Rowan said, keeping his back to the room. I am the king, Kalen's voice drifted up, amused. I am authorized to be in your mind, let alone your library. Rowan slammed the book shut and descended the ladder, wiping dust from his trousers. What do you want? If you're here to punish me for the gala, get it over with. I have work to do. Kalen leaned against a mahogany table, looking obscenely vibrant against the backdrop of gray, dusty books. He was wearing a casual black shirt, the top buttons undone, exposing the column of his throat. Punish you? No. I'm here to offer you a job. Rowan blinked, confused. I have a job. A better one. My personal historian. Kalen picked up a quill from Rowan's desk, twirling it dexterously. I need someone to chronicle my reign. Someone honest. My court is full of sycophants who tell me my excrement smells like roses. You, on the other hand, seem to think I am the devil. I want that perspective. You want me to follow you around and write down every time you abuse your power? Rowan asked skeptically. Precisely. Kalen's golden eyes flashed. Unless you're afraid? Afraid of what? That you might find out I'm not the monster you've invented in your head. It was a challenge. Rowan knew he should refuse. Being in close proximity to a prime alpha like Kalen was dangerous for an omega on suppressants. The biological pressure to submit, to bare his neck, would be constant. But the historian in him, the scholar who sought truth, couldn't resist the access. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could find evidence in the king's inner circle to help the underground reformist movement Rowan secretly supported. Fine, Rowan said, his voice clipped. But I have conditions. No touching. No pheromone displays. And I sleep in my own quarters. Kalen smirked, pushing off the desk. I wouldn't dream of touching you, Rowan. Not until you beg me to. Then you'll be waiting for an eternity. We have time. The weeks that followed were a grueling war of attrition. Kalen dragged Rowan everywhere. Council meetings, military inspections, diplomatic banquets. Rowan stood in the shadows, notebook in hand, observing. He tried to hate Kalen. He tried to maintain the image of the tyrant. But the reality was irritatingly complex. He saw Kalen argue for hours with the Council of Elders to lower grain taxes for the poor. He saw Kalen execute a corrupt duke who had been abusing his Omega servants. He saw a man who was exhausted, lonely, and carrying the weight of a fracturing kingdom on his shoulders. Yet, Kalen was still an arrogant prick. He delighted in teasing Rowan. He would deliberately lean close during meetings to point something out on a map, letting his cedar scent wash over Rowan, testing the strength of the Omega suppressants. You're grinding your teeth, Kalen whispered during a particularly boring trade negotiation with a neighboring duchy. Careful, or you'll chip them. If you sat any closer, you'd be in my lap, Rowan hissed back, refusing to look at him. An enticing thought, Kalen drawled. Why do you do this? Rowan snapped, keeping his voice low. There are a dozen Omegas in this room who are practically fainting for your attention. Why bother the one who wants you dead? Kalen's expression sobered instantly. The playfulness vanished, replaced by a sharp, terrifying intensity. Because, he murmured, a diamond is only valuable because it is hard to cut. Those others, they are glass. You, Rowan, are the only thing in this kingdom that feels real. It was a strange, twisted logic, but Rowan understood it. To a man who had everything, the only thing of value was what he couldn't have. Kalen didn't just want an Omega, he wanted a conquest. But biology is a cruel mistress, and suppressants are not infallible. It happened during a torrential storm. The roads to the capital were flooded, trapping the court in the summer palace, an isolated fortress in the mountains. Rowan had been feeling off for days, a feverish heat under his skin, a dull ache in his lower abdomen. He attributed it to stress. He took a double dose of his pills and tried to work. He was in the king's private study, organizing correspondence, when the heat hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't a slow build, it was a dam breaking. His suppressants had failed. Rowan collapsed against the desk, gasping. The room spun. His body, so long denied its natural cycle, was rebelling with vengeance. The scent he had hidden for years exploded outward, sweet vanilla and night-blooming jasmine. A scent so potent, it was almost dizzying. The door opened. Kalen froze in the doorway. He was drenched from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He inhaled sharply, his pupils dilating until his eyes were almost entirely black. Rowan, Kalen groaned, the sound guttural, torn from his chest. Rowan scrambled backward, knocking over a stack of books. Stay back, he cried, though his voice was weak. Get out. This was the nightmare. An Omega in heat, alone with an Alpha King. Instinct would take over. Kalen would lose control. He would claim him, bite him, knot him, and Rowan would be reduced to nothing but a mate. Kalen took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The muscles in his neck corded with strain. The scent of vanilla was driving him mad. It was calling to the deepest, most primal part of his brain that demanded he take, own, and protect. You need. Kalen's voice was a ragged growl. You need an alpha. I need you to leave. Rowan sobbed, clutching his stomach as a cramp doubled him over. He fully expected Kalen to lock the door. But Kalen didn't lock the door. He ripped it open. "Guards!" Kalen roared, the sound shaking the walls. "Clear the hallway. Get the physician. Now." He turned back to Rowan, his chest heaving. He looked like a man in physical agony, fighting a war against his own biology. He stripped off his heavy coat and threw it, not at Rowan, but over him, covering him from a distance. "Cover yourself," Kalen commanded, his voice shaking. "I am leaving. If I stay, I won't be able to stop." Rowan stared at him through the haze of heat. "Why?" he whispered. "You could take me. No one would stop you." Kalen gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. He looked back, his eyes burning with a mixture of lust and something profoundly, painfully tender. "I told you, Rowan. I don't want your submission because your biology forces you to give it. I want you. All of you. Or nothing." He slammed the door, sealing Rowan inside, safe from everyone, including the king. Rowan spent 3 days in the agony of the heat, attended only by beta physicians. When the fever finally broke, he felt hollowed out, exhausted, but strangely clear-headed. He lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling. Kalen hadn't touched him. The most powerful alpha in the world, presented with his prey, in its most vulnerable state, had walked away. Rowan realized with a jolt that he had been wrong. The reformist pamphlets said alphas were slaves to their instincts, incapable of reason when faced with an omega in heat. Kalen had proven them wrong. When Rowan finally emerged, shaky but composed, the dynamic had shifted. He found Kalen on the training grounds, violently dismantling a straw dummy with a broadsword. The king looked like he hadn't slept in days. Kalen stopped when he saw Rowan approaching. He didn't say a word, just breathed heavily, sweat dripping down his chest. "You look terrible," Rowan said softly. "You smell like antiseptic," Kalen replied, sheathing his sword. "It's an improvement." "Thank you," Rowan said. He didn't mean for the compliment on his scent. Kalen looked away, wiping his face with a towel. "Don't thank me for basic decency. It's pathetic that you think not being raped is a favor. In this world, it is a miracle," Rowan countered. He took a step closer. The fear was gone. "Why did you really walk away, Kalen?" Kalen turned to him, his expression unguarded for the first time. "Because you are my soulmate, you idiot. I knew it the moment I saw you at the gala. I didn't want to just breed you. I wanted you to choose me." The confession hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Before Rowan could respond, the alarm bells of the castle began to ring. It wasn't the rhythmic toll of the hour, it was the frantic, discordant clanging of an invasion. "Assassins," Kalen snarled, his alpha demeanor snapping back into place instantly. He grabbed Rowan's arm, pulling him toward the keep. "The insurrectionists. They've breached the perimeter." They ran through the stone corridors. The palace was in chaos. The reformist group, the very group Rowan had sympathized with, had decided that tonight was the night to end the monarchy. They were cornered in the West Wing gallery. 5 men in dark tactical gear blocked the exit. They weren't here for reform. They were mercenaries hired by a rival nation, using the reformist cause as a cover. "Well," the leader of the assassins sneered, leveling a crossbow. "The king and his pet." Kalen shoved Rowan behind him. "Get to the service hatch," Kalen ordered, his voice low. "I'll hold them." "You don't have a weapon," Rowan hissed. "I am the weapon. Go." Kalen launched himself at the men. It was a blur of violence. Kalen moved with supernatural speed, his alpha strength on full display. He broke the first man's arm with a sickening crunch, using the body as a shield against a bolt. But there were too many of them. Rowan watched, frozen. He saw a blade slice across Kalen's ribs. He saw the king stumble. Rowan looked at the service hatch, his escape. He could run. He could let the tyrant die and be free. He could watch the monarchy crumble. But the man bleeding on the floor wasn't a tyrant. He was the man who had covered Rowan with his coat. He was the man who wanted to be chosen. Rowan didn't run. He grabbed a heavy marble bust from a pedestal, ironically, a bust of Kalen's grandfather, and screamed. The assassin about to deliver the killing blow to Kalen turned, surprised by the Omega's war cry. It was the split second Kalen needed. Rowan hurled the bust, striking the assassin in the shoulder, staggering him. Kalen swept the man's legs out from under him and delivered a crushing blow to his temple. Silence fell over the gallery. Bodies lay groaned or silent on the floor. Kalen was slumped against the wall, clutching his bleeding side. Rowan dropped to his knees beside him, his hands pressing against the wound. "You reckless, arrogant fool," Rowan choked out, tears stinging his eyes. Kalen coughed, blood staining his teeth. He looked at Rowan with a dazed, pained smile. "You stayed. I told you I sleep in my own quarters," Rowan said frantically, tearing his shirt to make a bandage. "You don't get to die and leave me with all that paperwork." Kalen reached up, his bloodied hand cupping Rowan's cheek. The touch was electric. "You didn't run." "No," Rowan whispered, leaning into the touch, surrendering to the pull he had fought for months. "I didn't." "Does this mean," Kalen wheezed, "that you're finally submitting?" Rowan laughed, a wet, tearful sound. He leaned down, pressing his forehead against Kalen's. "It means," Rowan said fiercely, "that if you survive this, I'm going to make your life a living hell, Your Majesty. But I'll do it by your side." Kalen closed his eyes, his breathing shallow but steady. "Best offer I've had all year." The recovery was slow. The attempted coup was crushed, the mercenaries exposed. But the real change happened within the palace walls. When Kalen finally returned to the throne room, weeks later, he did not sit alone. A second chair had been added to the dais. It wasn't a throne, but a desk, an archivist's desk. Rowan sat there, reviewing a stack of decrees. He was no longer the hidden Omega. He was the king's consort, though he refused the title, preferring royal advisor. The court whispered. They said the king had been bewitched. They said the Omega had used dark magic. But when they saw the way Kalen looked at Rowan, not with the hunger of a master looking at a slave, but with the reverence of a man looking at his equal, they fell silent. Kalen walked over to the desk, ignoring the murmuring nobles. He leaned down, brushing his lips against Rowan's ear. The scent of cedar and vanilla mingled in the air, a perfect, terrifying harmony. "They are waiting for you to bow," Kalen whispered. Rowan looked up, his eyes sharp and clear behind his glasses. He smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. "Let them wait. We have a kingdom to rewrite." Kalen straightened, facing his court, his hand resting possessively, proudly, on Rowan's shoulder. The Omega didn't kneel. And for the first time in the history of Oakhaven, the Alpha King didn't ask him to. And that is how the Viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing the king finally yield to the only man who dared to defy him, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, is love worth sacrificing your lifelong principles for? Or is freedom the only thing that matters? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, Man 1. Alpha King, tall, broad shoulders, messy dark hair, golden eyes, wearing unbuttoned black regal shirt, sweat and blood on skin, protective stance, intense expression. Man 2. Omega, slim but defiant, wearing glasses and disheveled librarian vest, holding a marble bust as a weapon, looking fierce. Background is a luxurious palace hallway, shattered glass, defeated. Assassins in shadows, dramatic cinematic lighting, particles in air, high contrast, emotional tension.